Good morning. This is Luda Kopikina with GAI Insights. We're going to go over 7 articles today and rate them essential, important, and optional to save you time in your busy day. We have everything from New York Times using AI to a use case with AWS in security risk identifying risks and so on. So a lot of interesting announcements from Anthropic and the like. So let's start with the first article, Ankash.
Sure, Luda. So the first one that we have for today comes from Anthropic, and it talks about how Anthropic has added a PDF support capability in their Anthropic API.
What do you think about this, Adam?
So just to be clear, it already had the capability to do OCR and extract text, but to be able to look at images and actually use the multimodal capability of seeing the pictures is a huge step forward. It adds to the value, but it's incremental in some ways. There are certainly other foundation models that already have this capability. So I was considering it as optional news, sort of step change advancement. That being said, I actually took the last PDF of tonight and I fed it to it, and it got some pretty good insights out of the data, which is a bunch of, so I also certainly see the use of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because the work with PDFs that we have a lot of is an important topic. And so the simpler it is and the more in depth it is, the better it is. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I agree. It's probably optional. It's on the margin for me because this is an important capability in many practical use cases. We were talking last night on the Learning Lab. I spent a fair amount of time doing various projects at various levels of government, and there are so many PDFs full of scratchy handwriting. So I don't know if this would work on scratchy handwriting. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. There were other tools that were sort of okay at it already, so I assume it would be. And if it can master that, it's really quite opens up a lot of interesting use cases that are quite practical. But I sort of agree with Adam that it's playing a little bit of catch up here and an incremental addition to what they already had, which was great. Most people don't even know how great it already is. So it was already great. Now it's better. But I can't make it important because it's just already out there for a lot of people.
Okay. Paul, Ankash, optional?
Yeah, I think it's optional for now, but I think PDFs is such an interesting area. We talked about 90% of the corporate information in unstructured data. So much of the important information of unstructured data we put in PDFs, contracts, annual reports, customer deliveries, PDFs, or analyst reports here, policies. So I think the whole PDF thread is really, really important in terms of unlocking value, but optional for this particular article.
Okay, optional it is. Let's go to the next one, Ankash.
Okay, just an interesting insight on Anthropic. So they have released their Haiku 3.5 model last week, and now they are saying that Haiku 3.5 is doing better than their top model, which was Claude 3 Opus earlier. And what is more interesting is that they have increased the price for Haiku 3.5 after realizing that it's doing better than their flagship model, but still the flagship model is priced at least 5 times costlier than the Haiku 3.5 model. So Adam, I just came across this while I was researching this one, so that's why it's not there. But kind of interesting how Anthropic is changing pricing after launching a model and realizing that their model is better than the other
Yeah, it's
models.
good to lump that in here. I think it's extraordinary to think Haiku, which is the smallest of their 3 models in the 3.5 level, they're saying is actually now outperforming their 3.5 Sonnet, the old one. So what they're able to do in terms of post-training advancements is really impressive.
Yeah.
Correct, correct.
Okay, but
Yeah.
optional now. Okay, next article.
Yes, option for now. So the next one comes from Ethan Mollick, and he is saying about the present future, AI's impact long before superintelligence.
Okay, what do you think about this, Tim?
I think, you know, I think it's a good article. I would rate this important because I guess to me it's incredibly obvious, and I'll beat the drum a little bit again, but I don't think it's obvious to most people. We have, I don't know, hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in making a science fair project a huge industry. And it's still a science fair project, in my opinion, for the most part. It has never been studied deeply. There has never been any real long research efforts into both just the basic technology and how to improve it, which is why we see massive improvements all the time, because the research is going on commercially and tends to be somewhat haphazard. But we also haven't done the other side of it, which is how do we deal with this stuff in society? There's just absolutely no effort in doing that. There's lots of talk about it, and newspapers, I get newspapers, an old term, whatever we call it, news outlets that get information and broadcast information to us love it because it's a great headline, but there's absolutely nothing going on underneath it. And I doubt there will be, because we are driven, we're sort of in a very commerce-oriented society that has very little thought about the impacts of that commerce on itself. And so I think he's right. I think there's lots of issues to be addressed. I have very little optimism that we will address them, but I think it's I'll rate it as important, maybe even essential, to at least try and raise consciousness to people that, hey, you know, we're doing things here that are really powerful. And when you give really powerful tools to mostly people who have mostly lizard brains, bad things can happen if you aren't paying attention.
Right. I would back essential, actually, because the main message is very critical, and he does a good job about putting it together as a message that is important to think about. So I was thinking essential.
Works for me.
What do you think, Paul? Adam?
Yeah, Luda, I'm go ahead, Adam.
Oh, I was thinking important, but I could support essential. It is certainly a good read and important point.
Oh, yeah. Luda, I'm leaning on essential as well. I think the point, Tim, you're making as well is such. I had 2 meetings yesterday, just reinformed it. Just because we've done 150 shows and we've been thinking about this for 2 years, that's not where our average reader is. And I think to continue to find things that resonate and frame it and teach them. And I think he does a really good job here of finding everyday metaphors to understand this, like this coach and manager one that we're looking at right here. So I had essential with it.
Okay.
He also, as an aside, almost does a phenomenal job of showcasing some of the leading edge capabilities with generative AI at the same time.
Yeah. It is. That's another, it's a good point. And that occurred to me as well. And I'm glad you brought it up, because I forgot about it in my rant on the general ethics problem. So that's a good point. It's really worth reading and watching just to see what is already possible. And that is his point, which is true. It doesn't, we don't have to wait for the ICBM highly targeted nuclear weapon. We already have a nuclear weapon. It's already pretty dangerous and pretty powerful.
Yeah. So he's saying, look, it's just the beginning. And I quote, "The urgent task before us is ensuring these transformations enhance rather than diminish human potential, creating workplaces where technology serves to elevate human capability rather than replace it." So I think it's a powerful message. Okay.
Luda, I think the thing, it's so hard to get our head around. Usually we see these things and they're like parlor trick side things with what technology can do here. This is every single day the frontier is moving. And I'm sitting here in San Francisco, and again, I'm reminded here, this is maybe the only city in the world that has, 1,700 autonomous vehicles running around here. And it's every day. It's commonplace. No one even talks about it. It's just the
Exactly.
future is here every single day in San Francisco, and 5 billion people in the world don't understand it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, essentially it is. Next, Ankash.
Okay, the next one comes from Epoch AI, and it talks about the data movement bottlenecks to large-scale model training.
Yeah, this is mine. Okay, so this is a rather very well researched, but somewhat, I think, esoteric article. So I rated it as optional. So essentially, what researchers have surmised that as amount of data in training the models increases, the data movements and scaling of these training environments will hit a ceiling. And they've computed based on a whole bunch of assumptions what that ceiling is. And then they talk about different ways of scaling without hitting this ceiling, which is interesting, which is worthwhile, but not for the general reader. So they go through, for example, okay, the swaps of memory data in memory on the chip, the swaps between the chips, how you scale it to many chips in the training, and how you limit it with the duration, and all these parameters together to optimize the training process not to hit the ceiling. So interesting, but optional.
Yeah, I agree. Totally optional in my mind for anybody but the people directly involved in current areas of optimization. This is a class, again, I'll reuse the term I use. I've called it the dog catches car moment, or I call these products science fair projects, because these are things that came out of research way too fast before they had any real understanding of what to do with them, but they were sellable. They could make money on them, and that's what we do. So we just shove them out, and here they are. And we're trying to optimize them. And, this is, if I wanted to be really pejorative, I could say rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's not quite that bad, but it is like saying, gosh, we have the most hideous clumped together artifact here that kind of works. It's like a terrible Frankenstein. And now we're trying to put makeup on it and, make it go better and make it more, make it walk faster. And it's like, okay, I understand that. And in fact, practically speaking, because it's already out there and so embedded, people will want to do this. And because improvements can take an arbitrarily long time, we may well need it before some other model takes over. But there's also, in my mind, a very strong probability that this will be a non-issue in 5 or 10 years. Just
Correct.
By the time we get there, it won't be an issue because the models will look fundamentally different.
And hardware is changing. It's all built on sand.
Yeah. And again, I wish we would put more money into the fundamental research, because this is just over optimization way too early, which is a fundamental problem in computer science. It's how we ended up with C being the dominant language for 40 years. Just over optimizing everything way before we understand it.
Thank you, Tim. This is a great insight, but optional it is. Okay, Ankar's next article, please.
Okay, the next one talks about how the New York Times is using GenAI as a reporting tool.
Adam, what do you think about it?
So look, this is an interesting article. It's debatably important because it's the New York Times, and that's fairly high profile use case. But at the end of the day, really what they did is they had 400 hours of audio. I believe it was not audio and video. Yeah, 400 hours of conversations that they used AI to help provide analysis from and filter through, saving them a ton of time. It's an incredibly powerful use case. It's a great use case. On our learning lab just last night, we had Clipper and Humphrey, the CEO of Clipper, talking about the way they're using AI to summarize all of the police data from when they go out all day, and they can spend more time actually doing their job because it's helping with that, tremendously lengthy analysis of what is all of this recorded footage and what is in there and how to derive meaning from it. So it's a powerful use case. I'd probably say generally it would be optional news because the use case itself is a fairly straightforward one that we're familiar with. debatably important because it is about a high-profile article with the New York Times.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going
Yeah,
on.
I'd argue for important because of the ease of understanding of this use case and the name of the New York Times attached to it. And so, you know, everybody likes to make fun of my back pocket analogy. This would be an upper back pocket one because everybody understands the New York Times. Everybody understands the amount of data they have to deal with. And they give you know, nice figures here on the amount of video and words they're trying to deal with. And it's also a good example of what I've been talking about lately, which is how to create a reliable system from unreliable parts. And that's, you know, we call this human in the loop. That's one version of it. So we use the AI, but then they had a good process for going back and having the humans, the reporters, fact check the transcripts and things to make sure that there weren't any fabrications, et cetera. Now, we could argue the other side that, well, maybe there's a crucial point they missed in there somewhere, but we don't know. We don't have enough studies to really tell that. And they certainly got a lot of it, they feel like. And I think that probably does work, sampling by the humans and then using the robots to summarize. This is, as you say, a classic use case. But I think it's a good write-up of one and be very helpful for most AI leaders.
Okay. Thinking important, Paul, Ankaj. Paul, what do you think?
I support
Important for me. Yeah.
Support important. Okay, important it is. Let's base. Next article, please.
Okay. The next one comes from Bain and Company, and they talk about the $100 billion opportunity for GenAI in P&C claims handling.
Okay, what do you think about it, Tim?
So this is a reasonably good article at the strategic level. So Bain, you know, they have domain experts who understand insurance. They went through a nice chart here on their economics. They made a nice also chart of mapping the use cases and talking about how to start with high value use cases. This one here. So it's a good article for P&C insurance, property and casualty is P&C insurance companies, which is a big market. So if you're in that market, this is an important article. If you're not in that market, I would say this is pretty optional. The higher level meta stuff about how to do this is been written a million times at this point. So I don't think it's necessary to reread it. And I'll make, since I'm in a polemic mood this morning, I'll make one more comment, which is, you know, everybody always wants the small wins, right? So find a use case that's really easy and fast, and you know, find other use cases that are like that so you can reuse artifacts. There are good points there, and that is a good way to get some momentum. The other thing you have to remember is Astra Teller, who runs the Google Moonshot lab where Google did things like the autonomous vehicles. He has this metaphor he calls monkeys and pedestals. And, you know, his metaphor is, if you want to create monkeys that can juggle flaming batons on a pedestal, 9 out of 10 businesses would build the pedestal because it's easy and it's an early win and it's really easy to do. But in fact, the really hard part if you're tackling tough problems is, can you even get monkeys to throw flaming batons? Okay. And so if you're really after hard problems, you better check out and make sure you have a chance at getting those monkeys to work, because the pedestals are pretty trivial. Yeah. So there is something to that here, that to be careful that if you just do really trivial things, you better at least think a little bit harder about, can this really scale? What are the implications to your organization and to the industry? Are there bigger things that you should be worried about that could happen over a longer period of time? But if you don't start to address them now, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. So I like, John had a term for it that I can't remember, but I like the idea of doing a little bit of both. So doing some of these easy use cases first, but also doing some big thinking right at the beginning to try and think about, how's this going to for people in the crucible, Paul, for your and John's term, how is this going to disrupt the industry and just reorient all the players? So just a little thought on top of it. But I would still call this optional for the general leader.
Yeah, I was also thinking optional because the advice is pretty generic. And even though there are discussions about P&C industry specifically and how it can help optimize and streamline some processes in P&C, it's pretty generic still. So in my mind, it was optional. Paul, Adam?
Optional.
Optional. Adam, okay with optional? Adam, you're probably on mute.
No,
I gave a thumbs up and I was nodding. Sorry, I thought it was
okay. Okay.
He was gesturing, but Zoom is not great sometimes for gestures.
Okay, great. Next article, Ankash. So optional it is.
Yes. So this one from AWS, it talks about CrowdStrike's Charlotte AI, which is enhancing productivity of cyber security analysts.
So this is an interesting case. So AWS publishes these cases with a partner. In this case, the partner is CrowdStrike, and this is the vendor that is focused on security risk identification and management. And they do and so they built this platform that is called, what is it called? Charlotte AI, right? So that platform, and then they go into specific use cases with the impact that CrowdStrike sees in using this, working with their customers. So it's a very comprehensive security, risk identification article, and a very good use case with examples and ROI. So I rated it as important, but I can be, I guess, talked into optional like we did. But in my mind, this is AWS. This is a powerful area, security, and I think it's worth highlighting. What do you think? Paul, Adam?
I had as optional. I think that security, I think, is underappreciated, the security risk. I think what's notable here, they take the breakout time from 2 hours to 1 hour because of Gen AI. And the CrowdStrike thing here, I mean, Delta is soon for, I think, $300 million damages for the CrowdStrike outage here. So
that's true.
I had important, I mean, I think as AI leaders get into investment budgets for next year, security needs to be supported sufficiently.
But you thought it's optional.
I know important. I had important.
Important. Okay. Yeah. What do you think, Adam, Tim?
Yeah, I think their use cases we're familiar with, but when they're all rolled up and nicely with a bow like this, it's probably a good one to flag in a very important space. But it does a fairly good job of demonstrating what they've done, but covering a fair extent of the use cases within security for Gen AI.
Okay, wonderful. Let's put it important. Okay, on we go. Next article, please, Ankash.
Okay, the last one that we have for today comes from the information, and it talks about the Gen AI spending of 50 companies from Coke to Walmart.
Yes. What do you think about this, Adam?
I think it's at least important to be aware of this data, tuck it away. Potentially, I could see a passionate case for why this is essential information. It is hard data. It's not totally clear to me to what extent it's accurate necessarily versus reported. But nonetheless, even as you can see there, the yearly spend for a lot of these companies isn't actually even published. But understanding what they're using generative AI for, what vendors they're working with, which models. Further down, it gets into some pretty good data around some of the different specific Gen AI use cases and who's using it for what, who's using Copilot how much versus GitHub, those sorts of things. So I think it's what was the other one? OpenAI Enterprise had a very big ChatGPT Enterprise had a big presence as well. So at minimum, it's important to have a look and tuck away, because at least one of these companies is going to be someone you're going to want to be able to point to come the budget cycle.
And for some of them, as you can see, there is a spend as well. It's sparsely populated yet because that data is not quite known, but for some it's there. So that's good. Tim,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's. I was sort of on the border. It's because it is so vague in its quantitative aspects, but I think it's probably important for people. Again, it's the professor-student thing where this stuff validates what we've been saying forever. OpenAI is the dominant player. Other players are making progress. All the big players have some big customers. The use cases are right in the heart of what we've been saying, or the big use cases. So it's great to read this. And I think if only for that reason, it's probably worth having a broader audience read it to just make them familiar with this is what's happening out in the market, folks. You know, we aren't kidding when we talk about this stuff. And here's some evidence to show us that, yeah, you know, at least at a qualitative level, you can see OpenAI is everywhere still. They are still the dominant player. One of the interesting things was there's a lot more direct OpenAI, it appears. And that's where I worry a little bit about how right the data is, whether these people are really using OpenAI directly or whether they're getting Azure, OpenAI. But if it's correct, then OpenAI is making some real inroads in their own direct enterprise sales. So I think it's important. I think it's and I agree with Adam. The use cases, there's a good summary of the use cases after this information.
Yeah, great. So let's rate it as important. And I want to say thank you. Here's Ashish voting important for this security application with CrowdStrike. Thank you. And thank you, our participants, for voting along with us and helping us rate these articles from your perspective. This is great. So we're at the end of our list of articles. Any announcements? Anything?
Yeah, I'm going to just highlight in the Learning Lab, we had a Humphrey, who was CEO of Clipper, do a fantastic case study. They're using Gen AI on body cams. So body cam employee records everything all day long, and the average police person spends, I think it was saying, 2 to 3 hours a day writing reports. And this uses Gen AI to summarize everything that happened today, pre-populate a draft report to save 1 to 2 hours. So just a fabulous use case that allows a policeman to either not get burned out, or more importantly, to spend another hour or two a day actually on the street fighting crime. So just a great use case. And you can see that his case study in our YouTube channel.
Yeah, I will include it in the letter. Let's include it, the link in the letter at the end. Okay, here's our scorecard for today. So we have, how many importance? We have 1 essential, 3 importance, and 3 optionals. So great day. Great
Yep,
day.
and I'll give Adam a quick shout out. The artifact he put together is very nice on that last article. Breaks everything down into a nice visual format. So yay, Adam.
Yeah.
Yay, Claude.
Yay, Claude. Yeah, yay, Claude. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, everyone, very much. And we'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.
So, Luda, I'm doing we're off, are we? No, I'm not. Why does it take so long?
I didn't hit the right